So this article is already contained in the longer Mercenaries and WHO spreading AIDS in Africa. So this is for people who don't like long, scary videos, and maybe you'll be encouraged to go back and watch the other one. So this is a little bit bait and a little bit of also just segregating this article for those who just want short stuff. So this is kind of important. Really, that other article is really important too, and it's worth watching. So anyway, moving along. WHO admits that smallpox vaccine created HIV/AIDS. This article is from January 13th, 2016. The London Times wrote an article in 1987 that linked the smallpox vaccine to the deadly spread of AIDS in the 1980s. In the article republished below, it is admitted that the WHO led a huge campaign aimed at eradicating smallpox, but may have also been responsible for awakening what we know today to be the HIV virus. Smallpox vaccine triggered AIDS virus. So triggered, maybe not so much created. Anyway. The AIDS epidemic may have been triggered by the mass vaccination campaign which eradicated smallpox. The WHO, which masterminded the 13-year campaign, is studying new scientific evidence suggesting that immunization with the smallpox vaccine Vaccinia awakened the unsuspected dormant human immunodefense virus infection. Some experts fear that in obliterating one disease, another disease was transformed from a minor endemic illness of the third world into the current pandemic. While doctors now accept that Vaccinia can activate other viruses, they are divided about whether it was the main catalyst to the AIDS epidemic. And one thing I think that is interesting about that is talking about this vaccine awakening the dormant HIV. Well, if HIV is dormant in you, how does it live and propagate itself? Wouldn't it just die off in time if it's dormant? It seems to me if it's in a host, it's probably working. So I find their explanations to be dubious, and I believe that they do actively spread diseases on purpose. So I mean, if you don't, fuck you, I guess. Get out of here. You don't belong here. Actually, I'm just kidding. You should probably pay attention and listen and think about what's going on in relation to this and in relation to the world today. What's going on with the current coronavirus, especially since that's a new vaccine for a specific type of virus that has never been done before, and it's actually in its third phase of testing. And I'll be doing a video on that as well. So anyway, let's move on with this one. But an advisor to WHO who disclosed the problem told the Times, "I thought it was just a coincidence until we studied the latest findings about the reactions, which can be caused by Vaccinia. Now I believe the smallpox vaccine theory is the explanation to the explosion of AIDS. In obliterating one disease, another was transformed." So dubious. Further evidence comes from the Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington. While smallpox vaccine is no longer kept for public health purposes, new recruits to the American Armed Services are immunized as a precaution against possible biological warfare. Routine vaccination of a 19-year-old recruit was the trigger for stimulation of dormant HIV virus into AIDS. So this is their evidence saying, no, it does happen. Trust us. This discovery of how people with subclinical HIV infection are at risk of rapid development of AIDS as a vaccine-induced disease was made by a medical team working with Dr. Robert Redfield at Walter Reed. The recruit who developed AIDS after vaccination had been healthy throughout his high school. He was given multiple immunizations followed by his first smallpox vaccination. 2.5 weeks later, he developed fever, headache, stiff neck stiffness, and night sweats. 3 weeks later, he was admitted to Walter Reed suffering from meningitis and rapidly developed further symptoms of AIDS and died after responding for a short time to treatment. There was no evidence that the recruit had been involved in any homosexual activity. Bear in mind, this is a republished article. It's from a time when that would have been their focus on the cause of HIV. So moving along, in describing their discovery in a paper established in the New England Journal of Medicine a fortnight ago, the Walter Reed team gave a warning against a plan to use modified versions of the smallpox vaccine to combat other diseases in developing countries. Other doctors who accept the connection between the anti-smallpox campaign and the AIDS epidemic now see answers to questions which had baffled them. How, for instance, the AIDS organism, previously regarded by scientists as a weak, slow, and vulnerable, began to behave like a type capable of creating a plague. Many experts are reluctant to support the theory publicly because they believe it would be interpreted unfairly as criticism of the WHO. In addition, they are concerned about the impact on other public health campaigns with vaccines, such as diphtheria, and the continued use of vaccinia in potential AIDS research. The coincidence between the anti-smallpox campaign and the rise of AIDS was discussed privately last year by experts at the WHO. The possibility was dismissed on grounds of unsatisfactory evidence. Advisors to the organization believed then that too much attention was being focused on AIDS by the media, so they wanted to defer people from looking at them too much with this because they didn't want to get their asses blamed for it. It is now felt that doubts would have risen sooner if public health authorities in Africa had more willingly reported infection statistics to the WHO and blame it on Africa. Instead, some African countries continued to ignore the existence of AIDS even after U.S. doctors alerted the world when the infection spread to the United States. However, as epidemiologists gleaned more information about AIDS from reluctant Central African countries, clues began to emerge from the new findings when examined against the wealth of detail known about smallpox, as recorded in the final report of the Global Commission for the Certification of Smallpox Eradication. Smallpox vaccine theory would account for the position of each of the 7 Central African states which top the league table of most affected countries, why Brazil became the most afflicted Latin American country, and how Haiti became the route for the spread of AIDS to the U.S. It also provides an explanation of how the infection was spread more evenly between males and females in Africa than in the West, and why there is less sign of infection among 5 to 11-year-olds in Central Africa. So, less sign of infection 5 to 11-year-olds because they hadn't, I guess, gotten the shot, whereas the other group before them had. The equality of spread between males and females in Africa because of everybody getting immunized, and the spread of AIDS to the U.S. because it was mainly a homosexual disease when it was first discovered in the early 80s, and perhaps it found that route through homosexuals visiting Haiti and bringing it back. So moving along. Although no detailed figures are available, WHO information indicated that the AIDS league table of Central Africa matches the concentration of vaccinations. The greatest spread of HIV infection coincides with the most intense immunization programs, with the number of people immunized as follows. Zaire, 37 million, Zambia, 20 million, Tanzania, 15 million, Uganda, almost 12 million, Malawi, 8 million, Rwanda, 3 million, Burundi, 3 million. Brazil, the only South American country covered in the eradication campaign, has the highest incidence of AIDS in that region. About 14,000 Haitians on United Nations secondment to Central Africa were covered in the campaign. They began to return home at a time when Haiti had become a popular playground for San Francisco homosexuals. Again, as I stated, bringing it back to the States from Haiti. So Dr. Robert Gello, who first identified the AIDS virus in the U.S., told the Times, the link between the WHO program and the epidemic in Africa is an interesting and important hypothesis. I cannot say that it actually happened, but I have been saying for some years that the use of live vaccines such as that used for smallpox can activate a dormant infection such as HIV. No blame can be attached to WHO, but if the hypothesis is correct, it is a tragic situation and a warning that we cannot ignore. Tragic situation. How many millions of people now have HIV? This article is 5 years old. I'm sure there's a far greater count now than there was then. AIDS was first officially reported from San Francisco in 1981, and it was about 2 years later before Central African states were implicated. It is now known that these states had become a reservoir of AIDS as long ago as the later 70s. Although detailed figures of AIDS cases in Africa are difficult to collect, The more than 2 million carriers and 50,000 deaths estimated by the WHO are concentrated in the countries where the smallpox immunization program was most intensive. The 13-year eradication campaign ended in 1980 with the saving of 2 million lives a year and 15 million infections. The global saving from eradication has been put in at dollars of 1,000 million a year. I guess that's what they were saying. 1,000 million, a billion a year. No, it'd be like 100 billion a year. Yeah. So charity and health workers are convinced that millions of new AIDS cases are about to hit southern Africa. After a meeting of 50 experts near Geneva this month, it was revealed that up to 75 million, one-third of the population, could have the disease within the next 5 years. It's interesting, 50 experts near Geneva. I am curious if that may have had something to do with an earlier Davos meeting, World Economic Forum style. Just curious. Of course, they don't give any information or links. This is an older article. Anyway, just curious. Some organizations which have closely studied Africa, such as War on Want, believe that South Africa's black population, so far largely protected from the disease, could be most affected as migrant workers bring it into the country from the worst hit areas further north. The apartheid policy, they predict, will intensify its outbreak by confining the groups into comparatively small, highly populated towns where it will be almost impossible to contain its spread. And there isn't really a good use of safe sex in Africa. Men prefer not to use condoms and they don't care. And there's actually a tribal tradition of not every African culture, but some, where the man basically just travels from town to town and has women that have his children in every town, and he just does a circuit. He goes and visits his kid and his wife, and he hangs out there and eats and hangs out and probably does some more fucking, and then goes to the other wife and probably does the same again. So it's no wonder AIDS spreads like crazy, that and everything else that goes on in Africa. So terrible, terrible stuff. So anyway, that's just a segregated segment of this article that is contained within another larger article that you should probably go watch if you haven't already, about mercenaries in the WHO spreading AIDS in Africa. So thanks for watching, and yeah, peace out. Catch you on the next vid.